It's early in the morning on April the 15th, 1912. It's dark and quiet as I stand on the empty bridge of a ship that has been under my command for only a few days. I look down as water begins to lap against my feet. This will be the end of my story, because I am the captain of the Titanic. My name is Edward John Smith, and I was born far from the sea in Hanley, Staffordshire, England. Being an industrious and most driven young man, I travelled to the seaport of Liverpool and achieved my first major goal in life, attaining an apprenticeship on a vessel, thus beginning my life as a seaman. A sailor's life came naturally to me, and by the age of 30, I was already working for the famed White Star Line, one of the most prominent shipping lines in the world, which carried cargo and passengers across the globe. I was able to climb the ranks quickly, going from a lowly fourth officer to command of my own ship in just 7 years. The White Star Line must have had no trouble recognizing my aptitude, because they soon gave me command of the RMS Majestic. She was a prize of the fleet that had just several years earlier held the record for fastest crossing of the Atlantic, making the voyage in an astoundingly quick 6 days. Being a true Englishman, I joined the Royal Naval Reserve, and when the Boer states rebelled and fresh troops needed transport to the south of Africa, I and the Majestic were there to take up the cause, and we completed our mission without any complications. Having done my duty and been awarded medals for my service, I returned to my career as a captain of the White Star Line's premier ocean liners. There wasn't a better group of sailors in the world than my fellow captains at the White Star Line, but a rumour must have begun to spread about me, and I soon developed a reputation for fast and safe sailing. Soon, there were a number of prominent passengers who would only make the transatlantic voyage if they could be assured that I would captain their vessel. That same rumour must have reached the boardroom of the White Star Line, as soon I was given the illustrious role of commanding all of the company's newest and grandest ships on their maiden voyages, a job I happily performed for several years. With all of my experiences at the helm of the line's biggest ocean liners, it was no surprise when in 1911 I was asked to command what would be the newest ship in the world, the Olympic. After another successful maiden voyage, we made a number of smooth sailings across the Atlantic. Of course, there was the one small circumstance where we somewhat collided with another ship. The courts may have ruled that the other vessel bore no responsibility, but it was posited in the trial by our defence that perhaps the Olympic's unprecedented size had displaced such an enormous amount of water that it sucked the other ship into our path, a theory I happen to agree with. And the entire incident would never have happened had they not been sailing dangerously close to us. Regardless of the outcome of the trial, the White Star Line clearly stood with me and saw through the attempts at making me a scapegoat. Otherwise, they would not have presented me with what would be the crowning achievement of my career: command of the largest and most magnificent ship ever put to sea, the RMS Titanic. Repairs to the Olympic from that small incident pushed back our maiden voyage as parts were pulled from the still under construction Titanic to fix the Olympic. Though we were delayed from our original start date on March the 20th, we took to the sea on April the 10th without issue, en route from Southampton to New York, carrying over 1,360 passengers and 908 crew. The first 4 days of our voyage went exactly as planned, and it was only on the 5th that we started receiving some warnings about drifting ice. I obviously take any warnings about potential hazards very seriously, but chose not to reduce our speed, as the White Star Line had intended to show that the Titanic was not only the largest and most luxurious ship in the world, but one of the quickest as well. And besides, my crew contained some of the best lookouts I had ever had the pleasure of knowing. They'd be able to spot any ice with the potential to damage our ship with more than enough time for us to adjust course. I retired to my quarters on the night of the 14th, confident in my ship, my crew, and myself. I am awoken by the crash at 11:40 p.m. My first officer rushes in and tells me, "Sir, we've collided with an iceberg." I quickly get up and make my way to the bridge. The crew bombards me with reports. The ship has been seriously damaged. I summon the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, who had joined us on the inaugural voyage of his masterpiece. We assess the damage and I ask him what the potential is for repair, but he stops me before I can even set a plan in motion. 5 of the ship's watertight compartments have been breached, he tells me. It's too much. The Titanic will sink in less than 3 hours. I can hardly believe what I'm hearing. The Titanic is the most advanced vessel to ever take to the seas, and I'm the most experienced captain alive. No one has sailed more of the massive ocean liners than myself. This isn't possible. I quickly do the math in my head. The Titanic left England significantly under capacity, but there's still only enough lifeboats for roughly half the passengers and crew. If the ship went down, over 1,000 people on board would drown or freeze in the open sea. I order the passengers and crew to the deck, but I begin to feel as if I'm in a daze. I start to make my own way to the deck, but have no memory of the journey, and when I arrive, there's somehow a megaphone in my hand. I shout some orders. I don't even remember the words, but I remember the faces. Some of the passengers look at me with hope, feeling some security now that their captain has appeared, while others look at me with fear, and dare I say, even appear to be blaming me. I can no longer bear to watch the lifeboats being lowered into the water, when I know there won't be enough. I begin to wander the ship. My officers find me and ask if I will give the order to abandon ship, but I can't bring myself to say the words. They seem frustrated with my inaction and run off to presumably do what they can in this hopeless situation. The minutes tick by, and I feel the deck shifting beneath my feet to a terrifying angle as the ship takes on more and more water. I make my way to the radio room, where the operators are still bravely sending out distress messages, and inspired by their duty, I'm finally able to tell them and any other crew I come across that they've done their best. But now is the time to abandon the ship. It's every man for himself. I find myself back where I have felt most comfortable and in control over these many years. The bridge. I look at my watch. 2:10 a.m. There's not much time left. The lights go out. The salt water must be shorting out the power. Water is lapping at my feet. As a sailor, I always knew it might end like this, but I never believed that one of my ships could go down. We're taking on more and more water as the ship's compartment fill. It won't be long now. The bridge begins to slip beneath the dark sea, and so too do I.